Hello, it's me, GBay99, your favorite YouTuber, and today I'm in the woods once again talking about League of Legends because currently it is a very exciting time of year. It's World Championship season. I've been following competitive League of Legends ever since I first started playing the game back in 2010, which means that I have had the privilege of being able to watch every single League of Legends World Championship live as it's occurred, giving me a bit of a unique perspective. And today I thought it might be a fun thing to go and take a bit of a trip down memory lane. In celebration of Worlds 2023, which starts this week at time of recording, I figured it might be a fun thing to go back and look at every World Championship that's occurred and rank them on a tier list, because I am getting married and have a wedding to pay for. We'll rank every Worlds on our tier list from S to F, S being a perfect event that was entertaining from beginning to end, with F being a failure of an event. There weren't many bad Worlds that have occurred across League history, but there was one that was a complete failure. I'm sure you all know which one it was already. As a disclaimer before we begin, these are just my personal rankings, my own subjective opinions on what I thought of each event. You can tell me your own opinions on the comments if you disagree. Please drive this video's engagement up. I'll be trying to rank these based on how generally entertaining each story was, though. So if there was a Worlds that had all sorts of exciting narratives, that will get it a higher ranking, whereas maybe there was a Worlds where one team just steamrolled everybody, which might be an impressive accomplishment, but it might have made the event pretty boring, so it'll be a lower ranking. Also, I will not be including the Season 1 Championship on this list. That event was more of a major tournament across an open circuit of lots of different majors that occurred from 2010 to 2012, and I don't really feel comfortable including that on a list like this without including all of those other majors as well. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and start off with Season 2 Worlds, an event often considered a favorite for anyone lucky enough to watch it. I think what made Season 2 Worlds so exciting for so many people was the great sense of unknown that was kind of surrounding the event. We had never seen a tournament in League of Legends history up until that point that genuinely saw every single region from the world represented, all sending their best teams. Nobody knew much about the event going into it in terms of how it would unfold, and certainly nobody had any idea who was going to win it. Korea were the likely favorites going into it because they were seen as the region that was about to come over and dominate League of Legends, but they had only been playing on dedicated servers for less than a full year, so there was a good shot that another region could actually take the title, even if Korea were the favorites. A lot of teams that were playing very well were CLG EU and Moscow 5 from Europe. A lot of people thought Moscow 5 was going to win this. CLG from NA actually had a decent shot at performing well. This was maybe the best shot NA ever had at winning Worlds, just because CLG spent the full year beforehand in Korea practicing nonstop, trying to become the best team they could possibly be. And of course, Team WE were huge favorites as well. Team WE might have actually been the presumptive favorites to win the whole thing. There were some issues that popped up with this event, namely in how it was run. There were issues with the format, where group stage was only a single round robin of best of ones between 4 teams before teams started getting eliminated, and then both quarterfinals and semifinals were only best of 3, which was a little bit disappointing. Grand finals was best of 5. But there were a lot of issues beyond that, including many technical issues. The games were being played outside, like in the elements, in nature, at least for the group stage event. So that meant a lot of players had to deal with glare from the sun, which was hitting their computer screens because they were outside. There was also the issue of the broadcast screen being shown to the audience was placed behind the players, so a lot of people couldn't help but turn around and look and cheat, looking at the mini-map and seeing through the fog of war. Oh, and there was also the big issue with the internet disconnecting. CLG EU and Team WE played a series, a best of 3, that had both teams on stage for 7 hours trying to just get through the series, but the internet kept on going down, disconnecting everyone from the game, and Riot couldn't find a way to like backdate the game and keep it alive, so they had to keep remaking the game and playing through it, but it kept on disconnecting.
Oh! CLG!
There were definitely a lot of issues with the event, but that kind of just made it more exciting to some degree. A lot of people were excited to see how it would all unfold, and then we got to see a crazy underdog story with TPA making it all the way to Grand Finals and beating Korea in Grand Finals to win the entire event. I made a whole documentary on their run, which is still one of the greatest stories in League of Legends history. It was one of the first documentaries I ever made, and I mean, Everybody loves Season 2 Worlds, at least anyone that got to see it. So I got to say, this is a fantastic event. Even if it wasn't perfect, it gets placed solidly in A tier. Season 3 Worlds, of course, was next, which aimed to be an even bigger and better event following Season 2. But sadly, this was a bit of a step back in League of Legends history. Of course, at this point, the LCS era began, which meant no international play. We had gone from 2010 through 2012, which saw a major international tournament every 1 to 2 months, to now having nothing but domestic play that involved a very long, grueling regular season with short playoff brackets afterward. And then we had one international event every year, which was the World Championship. Keep in mind, MSI did not exist at this point. That kind of put a bit of a damper on Season 3 Worlds because it had a lot of the same problems as Season 2. There were buys for teams who were given direct seeding out of group stage into the knockout bracket. There were only best of 3 quarterfinals, and the group stage had groups of 5 with only 2 teams advancing after a double round robin. It was a kind of disappointing conclusion to the end of the year, namely because if this is the only international tournament we get to see, there were not enough international games being played. There were some exciting moments that occurred at this Worlds, namely Gambit and Fnatic managed to knock out Samsung Ozone, one of Korea's top teams in the group stage. We also saw Reginald's swan song playing for TSM, and of course, Faker and SKT's rookie run to win the World Championship certainly deserves mention. There's certainly something to be said for Korea winning their first World Championship, but it was kind of predictable. It was kind of a frustrating event for being the only international event that League fans got to see all year. It was impressive seeing Faker stomp everybody, but it was a 3-0 stomp in finals, and we didn't get to see any more international play. I don't know, it was sad. As impressive of an accomplishment as it was, the sad sweep for the only international event of the year, I think, leaves this being placed pretty solidly in C tier. 2014 Worlds ended up being oddly similar to the Season 3 World Championship in all the best and worst ways. This era of League of Legends just felt really weird and kind of sad, at least for all the people who had been playing the game and paying attention to the competitive scene in Season 1 and Season 2, because in a game that cared so much about regional competition and international play, once again, this was the only international event that we got all year. This event was also marred with some really weird problems, like for example, the Korean champion who won the summer split, the KT Rolster Arrows, they did not get to go to this event. Winning the Korean summer split did not give them automatic qualification to Worlds. They had to play through a regional bracket that they didn't end up winning, so they were absent. On top of that, there was LMQ representing North America. So back in the Season 3, LMQ were an LPL team. They had played in the LPL and then got relegated. And rather than try to win qualification back to the LPL, they moved to North America and then won qualification into the LCS and started playing in the LCS, doing well enough that they, an LPL full Chinese team, represented North America at the Season 4 World Championship. I mean, just lots of weird stuff happening for a game that had cared so much about international competition and regional play up until this point. This tournament did have some really good moments, namely Kaboom and Alliance. Europe's #1 seeded team, Alliance, who were their summer champions, only had to beat a wild card team who nobody believed in for them to continue their tournament, and then they ended up losing in the most heartbreaking way. That was a big shock to everybody. There were also a lot of really inter-regional storylines going on. Samsung Blue and Samsung White met up in the semifinals of that event, and all of the Chinese teams played each other on the other side of the playoff bracket, which I've heard from different people that there were a lot of interesting storylines going on between all these different teams. But again, it was so sad and weird to see so little international competition between regions at the only international event of the year. There were some great stories going on here, and I may tell you more in a future documentary. Who knows? But for the most part, this kind of felt like a disappointing event, and so I think this has to be placed right down in C tier. Moving on to Season 5, thankfully 2015 Worlds was a big step up for League of Legends fans. The big story coming out from this year was the story of the Korean Exodus, which after Season 4 Worlds and Korea had just won 2 championships, all of the top talent in the region Pretty much all the best players except for Faker ended up leaving the region to go play in either China, North America, or Europe. As a result, a lot of people thought that this was going to be a really interesting and competitive World Championship. Korea was the worst it had ever been, at least since Season 2 Worlds, and all the other regions should have just gotten demonstrably better because of all the imports. This event did give us quite a bit of international fun, but not really in the way a lot of people were expecting. The KU Tigers, who were Korea's #2 seed, did end up looking pretty shaky in group stage at one point, losing to Taiwan. But there was just all sorts of drama with all sorts of top teams losing all over this tournament. North America's #1 seed, CLG, lost to Brazil in Group A. Invictus Gaming from China were knocked out in last place in their group, and the #1 seed from China, LGD, were eliminated in Group D in a huge shock that nobody expected. This group stage was followed by a really fun bracket that ended up seeing SKT make it all the way to Grand Finals and win their second World Championship, becoming the first team ever to win more than one Worlds as they took out the KU Tigers in Grand Finals. It was a little bit sad to see Korea versus Korea in Grand Finals instead of an international matchup, but it was kind of exciting still because we got to see the, Korea as underdogs, surprisingly enough, prove that they were not any worse even after the huge brain drain of the Korean Exodus. And it was actually a pretty close series in finals too. The downside of this event was that we didn't get any full 5-game series in the bracket in the knockout stage at all. And I mean, that's it. That's kind of the only downside that we had at this tournament, but that's a pretty big one. Generally speaking, at a tournament, you want your most exciting games to be the last matches that are played in semifinals and grand finals, and that did not happen at all here. Namely because of a big problem that League has always suffered from at its World Championships. That problem is that between quarterfinals and semifinals, as well as semifinals and grand finals, there's like a week of downtime, which kills all the hype and it kills all the potential of upsets. Generally speaking, in any kind of sport, but especially in esports, an upset will happen if teams are not given a ton of time to prepare for their opponents. Like in group stage at an event, if you have to play 3 different teams all in a single day, you can only prepare so much for each individual team. And there's the potential that maybe somebody who is less talented than you pulls out a strategy that you weren't expecting or something, and they're able to pull off a victory that might mean quite a bit. But if you have a full week of prep time to play one opponent in a best-of-5 series, the better team is always going to win. This Worlds was exciting for a little while because 2 European teams made semifinals, but then they both got swept 3-0, which was not particularly close. I mean, a little bit of a damper on the later stages of the event. This was still a good tournament though. I would rate it pretty highly, so I'm going to put it at a strong B to a light A. 2016 gave us a pretty incredible Worlds, and if any of you ended up watching this one live, you might remember this as your favorite World Championship, namely because of some of the craziness that we got with wildcard teams. This was the last event that we saw true wildcards, where a team who was from an emerging region was seeded directly into groups. Now we have the play-in stage that eliminates almost all the wildcards before the actual main event of Worlds begins, but here, a couple wildcard teams were seeded into groups and they pulled off incredible victories. For starters, the presumptive favorites of this tournament were EDG, a team who had just had, I think, a perfect or near perfect season in the LPL, and they got beat by Brazil in their first game of the tournament.
Their first game in the groups, and I'm willing to say this is a bigger upset than Kaboom.
That story would end up getting trumped by the craziness that we saw happen in Group A, though. So Group A had Korea's #1 seed, the ROX Tigers, who were one of the other presumptive favorites to win the whole thing, and they were placed in a group with Europe's #1 seed, G2 Esports, as well as CLG, who were North America's #2 seed. So going into this event, a lot of people thought that, oh, this might be an exciting group because Korea's obviously making it out, but Europe and North America, who have their historic rivalry, will play against each other, and, that'll be really fun and exciting to see who ends up coming out on top. Well, what I think nobody expected was the wildcard team in this group, ANX, Albus Nox Luna from the Commonwealth of Independent States. They ended up beating North America and Europe, and even took a game off of Korea, they got out of groups, which was a shock to everybody. They almost got out of groups in first place with the #1 seed. It was shocking.
They got ZZ Rut minis trying to stop these minis from hitting the actual Nexus. They're killing all the ZZ Rut Voidlings first, and now everyone is fighting as well.
Go for it, I think they have to. Back goes in, but Kura snipes on a miracle.
Nexus.
Tipping alive again. Nexus open, Kira trying to take down Bray with the Nexus to the level 2 fight for Lucid. Going for it, the hero of ANX. And it's
That's not enough just yet. Rock's
still alive.
Again.
All these minions are hitting the Voidling still. The Nexus is
go.
the greatest time.
He's gonna get it.
They did it.
Oh my God, they did it.
ANX just took down the Rocks Tigers.
International underdogs taking down Goliaths of esports. I mean, that's why you watch a sporting event, is to see the crazy upsets like that happen, which it was just beautiful and a great swan song for wild cards before they were kind of pushed away from the main event a little bit. The rest of this Worlds was really awesome though. In bracket, we didn't have any major upsets, but we got to see SKT go on a crazy run to win their third World Championship. It started with them playing RNG in quarterfinals, who were a historic rival to them at this point. Then they played the Rocks Tigers, two of Korea's best teams, playing in semifinals, which ended in a 3-2 full 5-game series with SKT coming out on top. Then we got to see SKT play Samsung Galaxy in grand finals. The only two Korean teams who had ever won a world championship up until that point play in grand finals for this world championship, and it was a treat to see. It was a full 5-game series, SKT narrowly coming out 3-2. It was beautiful. I mean, it was such a fun, exciting thing. That was the first grand finals that we had ever seen go to a full 5-game series. The only thing that prevents this from being a perfect S tier for me is that SKT were kind of the presumptive favorites to win. I mean, Rocks were the #1 seed from Korea because they had won the LCK Summer Championship, but SKT had come off winning MSI as well as the Spring title, and it's Faker, it's SKT. You kind of can expect them to win the World Championship at this point, so that was a little bit of a damper seeing the favorites win. I think to get that extra oomph of being in S tier, you need something special like an underdog story that nobody sees coming that makes it even a better event, even more perfect and everything, you know? So I'll say this is very solidly an A tier. Sadly, we went from one of the best Worlds ever to one of the worst when the 2017 event came around. So going into 2017 Worlds, all of Season 7, there was an item that was way too overpowered named Ardent Sensor. It was overpowered the entire year, and going into Worlds, Riot decided to buff it and make it even stronger, which nobody understood. I'm still upset about it today. Like, it totally ruined the event. Ardent Sensor made it so that everybody had to play passively. There were so many exciting, aggressive players and teams. You can watch my Khan documentary if you want to see more on that, but it just neutered all of the excitement from League of Legends with all of these different players and teams who now just had to play incredibly passively, incredibly boring. It was awful. The mechanics of how everything worked was that you wanted to just pick a shielding support and then pick a hypercarry ADC and then farm up to get Ardent Sensor and then just wait and try to farm up your AD carry to some sort of crazy late game where you can win with one big team fight at the end of the match. And this was super boring to see. There was no incentive for people to be aggressive basically whatsoever throughout the entirety of a match. All you wanted to do was farm up your ADC and your Ardent Sensor. That's all anyone could talk about, Ardent Sensor. It became a huge meme.
I love the fact that Ivan has been used. He was like low-key good coming into this because he brings Ardent Sensor. So when you run a support without Ardent Sensor, Ivan will bring that. We get that Alistar we just talked about. There's a Varus with no mobility on the side of Samsung.
However, they have still found an Ardent Sensor in their game. You can't ban all of them.
Generally, I've specifically tried to avoid mentioning meta-related things in this video so far because the meta is just kind of part of the game. Sometimes you play League of Legends and you're on a patch where all your champions are strong and you play really well, and sometimes everything you love gets nerfed and you can't help but just keep playing the game even if you're not able to perform up to the level you feel like you should be able to. And that's part of the game. It's part of the pro scene as well. But the problem is that in other events, when we've had meta changes from patches, it's never made the game this boring. The Juggernaut patch is maybe the most similar thing to Ardent Sensor in a single change affecting the World Championship, but the Juggernaut patch involved all of these hyper-aggressive carry champions like Darius top lane being picked and going and getting all these kills, and it was really exciting and really fun for a lot of the game. Ardent Sensor did the complete opposite. It completely removed all the action in the most boring way possible. Teams were going 30 minutes, 40 minutes into a match, and there was like 4 kills to 0 as the scoreline. Go and try to watch any of these games. Go pull up any of the VODs and tell me if it's entertaining. Of course, this event did have its moments story-wise where, you know, this was the iconic moment of Faker losing in grand finals and crying after getting swept 3-0, but the Ardent Sensor just left a stain on everything, and it's the worst Worlds that we've ever had. It is the only Worlds that gets placed squarely in F tier. Thankfully, 2018 Worlds gave us a really nice step up in quality with a much more exciting event that brought back some fun international play. At this point in league history, Korea had won 5 World Championships in a row. Korea had established themselves as the best region in League of Legends, bar none, and it was maybe getting a little bit boring, you might say. Generally, the way that Korea did this, to paint with a broad brush, is they focused on minimizing activity and maximizing precision. They kind of didn't have too much action going on. They weren't going for crazy 50-50 plays. They were just playing, as perfectly and technically sound as they possibly could with a lot of control around vision. And this moment in league history, 2018, was the first time that that stopped working. A lot of teams in Europe and China in particular were really leaning in on being more aggressive, more team fight oriented, going for crazy plays that, who knows, maybe they won't work, but it's gonna be fun either way, and we got to see that work very well at this World Championship. The big highlight of the group stage here was when Gen G, the team that had previously been former World Championship winning Samsung Galaxy, they got last place in their group. That was the first time since Season 3 Worlds that a team from Korea got eliminated in the group stage of the event. The bracket then had a really exciting start when Cloud9 upset the Afrika Freaks and Invictus Gaming beat KT Rolster. So all Korean teams were out. This was going to be the first World Championship that Korea did not win since Season 2 Worlds, and people got really excited for it. Additionally, G2 beat the potential favorites RNG in their quarterfinal series, a really exciting, thrilling 3-2. And then we also got to see Fnatic make their way into semifinals as well. So 3 of the 4 teams in semifinals were from the West, from North America or Europe. IG was the only one from China. But then teams had a week to prepare before semis, a week to prepare before finals, and everything got boring from then onward. It was a 3-0 sweep for IG in both semifinals and grand finals when they defeated Fnatic 3-0 to win the whole event. And it was a little bit of a damper at the very end of a very exciting Worlds. I personally loved seeing the Shy play so well and see IG win. Yeah, I mean, that was exciting. That was China's first World Championship ever. Very exciting stuff that happened, but I just wish the matches were closer and it wasn't nothing but 3-0 sweeps. And honestly, this was a World Championship that would have benefited from double elimination, I have to admit. Generally speaking, I'm a guy that does not like double elimination just because I value underdog stories and upsets almost more than anything else when I watch sport. So I don't want to see upsets that get mitigated because a team gets a second chance in a loser's bracket. I feel like that kills a lot of the potential for underdog Cinderella runs. If TPA, for example, at Season 2 Worlds ended up having to play through Azubu Frost twice or play through Moscow 5 twice, if it was a double elimination at Season 2 Worlds, then maybe they don't win. Maybe that was Taiwan's only World Championship. That's probably going to be the only World Championship Taiwan ever wins, and it happened because TPA were able to pull off this really exciting magical run. Whereas if they had to play Azubu Frost twice or Moscow 5 twice, then maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe just the favorites win because the favorites get a second chance in loser's bracket and fix whatever it is that went wrong. So I don't know. I don't like double elimination for that reason, but that being said, even I have to admit that this would have been a World Championship that would have benefited from double elim. I mean, it would have been great to see KT Rolster in grand finals with a rematch against IG or, RNG in finals. I don't know. There probably should have been double elim for this one. It was a disappointing finish to see such a one-sided sweep at the very end stages, the last 2 weeks, full 2 weeks of the event. So that was sad, although this was still a very exciting event for many different reasons and leading up to that end. So this gets placed very solidly in B tier. So honestly, I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but 2019 Worlds to me almost felt like a carbon copy of 2018 Worlds. Like those two events mold together in my mind as if they're the same event. Once again, we got to see some really exciting and fun competitive group stage play that fed into a really fun and exciting competitive early bracket. But once again, we also saw a grand final that was FPX from China beating G2 Esports from Europe. With a week of preparation, they were once again able to get a 3-0 sweep. There were a lot of exciting storylines here. I mean, G2's run was really special in particular, I think. But for me, watching this event and seeing the crowd in Europe and remembering that opening ceremony and everything, that's something that I don't know. To me, this event really made me miss Season 2 and Season 1, the 2010 to 2012 era, where we got to see crowds like that every single month, where we got to see international tournaments all the time, all these exciting hype crowds at IEM events, at MLGs, IPLs. Europe always has such great crowds when you go to any sort of esports event there, and it was really almost disappointing to get a stark reminder of how frequently we got to see those exciting live events that used to happen so frequently, whereas now we only get them once a year, maybe twice a year, I guess, with MSI. This Worlds was a really great one, and I don't mean to take anything away from it. Like, if you guys are someone who came into League of Legends more recently, and maybe this was one of the first Worlds that you got to see, you probably have really fond memories. If you're from Europe in particular and you got to go to this Worlds live, then you probably love this event and have so many fond memories of it. But for me, I just can't help but remember the great crowns that, you know, we used to always get to see. We used to always get to go to those kinds of events so frequently, and I don't know, it gave me a strong sense of nostalgia. Anyway, though, there were some great storylines here. You know, Doinb leading FPX to winning China's second world championship, and all the drama with Team Griffin and CV Max in Korea. That was really interesting as well. You know, but we didn't get a single best-of-5 series in the knockout stage, so that was a little bit of a bummer. And to me, this slots right underneath 2018 Worlds in B tier. That's the microphone. I thought it was a bug. We are now off to the 2020 World Championship, which concluded a turbulent COVID year. And this Worlds was frankly the third in a string of really solid World Championships that were pretty fun to watch. Of course, this tournament was special in that this was the first time we saw 4 teams from a couple of regions representing said regions, which we had never seen more than 3 at any previous World Championship. And this also came with a somewhat expanded play-in stage. Play-ins were pretty exciting, namely when LGD almost got knocked out, who were China's number 4 seed, and Mad Lions from Europe did get knocked out in play-ins. But really, the biggest story of this event was who from China would win the LPL's 3rd World Championship. Top Esports and JD Gaming were the 2 kings to topple, and most people expected that they would be meeting up to decide which one of them got to hoist that year's Summoners Cup. Both of these teams were uber talented. They were really exciting to watch in the LPL. They had been playing so well, and that's what made the bracket run so fun. In bracket, Fnatic managed to almost beat Top Esports in a really close 5-game series, which was super fun to watch. Somehow, though, that was topped in excitement when Suning, the 3rd seed from the LPL, managed to beat both JD Gaming and Top Esports to make it to grand finals themselves, which was so fun to see. Suning were a really fun team to watch at the time. Huang Fong, of course, had this big story that he had been homeless before he got involved in competitive League of Legends, but basically every player on that team was really exciting to watch. I personally loved seeing Bin play top lane, who, you know, I still am really excited every time he's queuing up. I think the biggest thing to take away from this event, though, was in League of Legends, at this point, you probably shouldn't be rooting for regions, or at least don't put too much emphasis on what region wins an event, because individual team storylines are way more interesting than what region comes out on top. It always makes me sad every time I see someone who says any kind of comment like, "Oh, Korea won Worlds this year, how boring, they always win Worlds." Like, yeah, that might be true that Korea has won more World Championships than anybody else, but if it's a 4 seed from Korea that goes through play-in stage or something and manages to beat all of these other domestic champions in this really crazy run-through bracket, that is a huge upset. That needs to be celebrated. That's like TPA winning Season 2 Worlds. This event, to me, served as a great reminder to pay attention to those individual player and team storylines and not just assume that all Koreans are equally great at League of Legends or that everyone from every region is going to play at the same skill level, because they won't. Every team has different strategies, different levels of talent, different things they excel at, and learning those storylines is an important part of watching a World Championship. As for this event, though, there were some faults. Namely, we did not get a full 5-game series other than Top Esports versus Fnatic in quarterfinals, and it was also still a number 1 seed that ended up winning, as Damwon Gaming from Korea did beat Suning in grand finals 3-1 to take home the first Korean championship in a couple of years. For all those reasons, I'm going to go ahead and place this bug. For all those reasons, I'm going to go ahead and place this in B tier, because there were still some better events. And one of those better events was 2021 Worlds, which was the greatest world championship I had ever seen in my lifetime, at least up until that point. As a reminder, this Worlds saw Japan winning a play-in group over North America to get direct qualification to the main event. A number 2 seed from China, FPX, who got last place in their group after a 3-way tiebreaker. A 4-way tiebreaker ended up happening in Group D, which is something we had never seen before. And then all of this was followed by the greatest bracket that we had ever seen. We had 4 of the 7 series go to a full best-of-5 games. There were all sorts of interesting storylines too, like the narrative of Khan's last dance as he was going to be going into the military. I made a whole documentary on that. There was also the story of Scout and Viper and Mako, who were playing for EDG, who at this point in League history were a perennial underperformer that had never come close to winning a world championship, even though they had historically been one of the most talented teams in the history of League. They ended up having a crazy run with all sorts of best-of-5s as they overthrew RNG and Gen G to make grand finals. And then we saw one of the most exciting epic 5-game finals series that we had ever seen. It was a storybook ending. It felt scripted with how perfect everything ended up happening, and that is why this was a perfect Worlds. This easily goes all the way up in S tier. And I'll go ahead and say it, Worlds 2022 was somehow even better. It goes right up in S tier along with 2021. I don't want to talk too much about what made Worlds 2022 so great, because I may or may not be working on a multi-part documentary series on that event, which may or may not come out sometime this winter. You may or may not want to look out for that. That's my list though. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for that documentary. And until then, here's hoping we have a great Worlds 2023.